right, so good night to everyone joining across social media. This is another Week in Review with your host, David K. Welch. For those of you that are joining on YouTube, good night to you. Special good night to everyone on YouTube. We're up on YouTube, right? Yeah. Facebook, as well as we streaming live tonight on TikTok tonight as well, because I feel like the people of TikTok really need to hear the truth. And I feel like that is something that maybe the country is lacking today, especially in regards to the recent announcement that Trinidad and Tobago dragon gas deal is back on. Kamala Persad-Bissessar would have, stated the following after meeting with the U.S. Secretary, Mr. Rubero. We find out that dragon gas is back on for the country. Now, in hindsight, this is a good move for the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I have nothing against it, mainly. I think we all know where it all stemmed from, especially given that the PNM has been speaking about dragon gas, and it has been a baby of the PNM for quite some time now. So I would only expect that the former energy minister is back on is the OFAC license. So therefore we can conduct business with hindsight Venezuela, and mainly to explore the dragon gas field. That is what is back on. That is what is back on. We still have to hear from Nicolas Maduro as to whether or not he is going to even engage in the dragon gas deal with Trinidad and Tobago, because we know that Maduro sort of changed his tone when it comes to Trinidad and Tobago since Keith Rowley or Stuart Young is no longer here. But the misinformation out there is that somehow the UNC changed their tone. And people say that the UNC and the government changed their tone because of this video.
The dragon gas is dead. We'd be foolish not to get it. And in fact, we should have started that since long ago. We should not have put everything into the dragon gas. That is dead. It is dead. They kept it alive for 10 years. And they couldn't do that in 10 years. Let's look right in the camera. As I mentioned, Grenada and Sudan.
So it's because of this video, Kamala Persad-Bissessar saying to the nation that the dragon gas deal is dead, and that they will be pursuing, something different in office. And then she goes to the United States, meets with the Secretary of State, and then the news headline is dragon gas back on. So that is what persons are saying Kamala Persad-Bissessar changed her tone on. But I think in order to understand whether or not the tone has changed or not, I think you need to go back to the past. And you need to understand where all of this stemmed from, and why dragon gas is such a big topic today. So persons on TikTok, when you're on TikTok and you're listening to persons commentating and you're listening to persons talk about dragon gas and the government change their tone, don't just look at the video just before elections or just on elections day. Let's go back to 2020. Let's go back to when the matter first arose. But let's get to Stuart Young. Because Stuart Young seems to think that the government is just lying to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, I want to know what the government have to lie about, what Kamala Persad-Bissessar have to lie about, given that dragon gas deal, if it goes into fruition, if, Venezuela even wants to do business with Trinidad and Tobago in the future, even if we're going to do business with Venezuela, or even if we're not going to do business with Venezuela, one of the things that we really need to take into consideration is that dragon gas will significantly benefit our economy, right? And it will benefit our economy only because one idiot decided to shut down Petrotrin. I don't know who that idiot was, but apparently he have a lot to say as well, Keith Christopher Rowley. But it's only because of a certain administration. Trinidad and Tobago is not only in the debt that it's in today, but even more. But let's take a listen to Stuart Young.
What we saw yesterday and the development between Secretary of State Rubio and Prime Minister and her very large entourage that did not include the Minister of Energy, and the announcement by the Secretary of State is absolutely no different to the conversations that he had with me and the PNM administration when I was Prime Minister. I met with him, as you would recall, in Jamaica. We had good conversation. After that, OFAC did cancel the licenses that existed for Dragon as well as Coquina Mannequin, Coquina Field. After that, you would recall, and I saw it properly reported in one of the newspapers today, the Newsday, you would recall that Secretary of State Rubio had a conversation with me as Prime Minister later on in April, where he made it abundantly clear. And he put out a release, and you should go back to the same release he put out, saying that he will work with us on our energy security and our energy deals. And in the world of diplomacy and diplomatic language, that is what we were talking about. However, premature Minister Munilal coming out and selling to the country, as is the Prime Minister, that they have obtained something is completely false. We had obtained an initial OFAC license in January 2023, where they spell out the terms of what they would allow. And in that license, they had said that you could not pay Venezuela and the people of Venezuela in fiat currency. It had to be in kind. The same UNC were grilling us in the PNM and asking how many times I traveled to Venezuela. And the same Munilal making a lot of noise and fanfare about me going there 13 times. Well, let us see what they do now. Because on every single one of those occasions, it was to meet with the government of Venezuela and their technocrats to then negotiate the terms upon which they would be prepared to allow Dragon gas to be sold to Trinidad and Tobago.
Interesting. So that's what Stuart Young said there via the press conference. Now, if it is that you are a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago that don't really follow politics and don't know much about Dragon gas, then you wouldn't understand this story at all. Because to better understand this story, you need to go all the way back to 2020 when the story was first brought up by Kamala Persad-Bissessar via a press conference. That's one of the things that you need to do. But to address something that Stuart Young said, he said, quote, or he said along the lines, that the conversation that was held with the U.S. Secretary of State is the very same conversation he, as a former minister and prime minister, had with the Secretary of State, and it's the same conversation that Kamala Persad-Bissessar today is having with the Secretary of State, Mr. Rubio. The thing is, if it is the same conversation, Trinidad and Tobago, then I would ask why it is it was denied back then, why it is the license was revoked. I think that's a fair question, Stuart. Why was the license revoked if it is that you had the same conversations that Kamala Persad-Bissessar is having now with Mr. Rubio in the United States, Secretary of State? If you're having these same things, then maybe it is that you would have had the license, Trinidad and Tobago would have had the license, the OFAC license to continue doing business with Venezuela. But it was revoked by the U.S. administration today. Next question for you, Stuart Young, since we're asking questions and we're telling all the truths in the world, why did Keith Rowley step down as Prime Minister, knowing that Donald Trump is now the President of the United States? You would have stepped down as Prime Minister and suddenly appointed yourself to continue the Dragon gas deal because Rowley said the Dragon gas deal is his legacy. Apparently, that's his legacy. His legacy is dancing with Nicolas Maduro, a narco-terrorist across there in Venezuela, and Trinidad and Tobago, rightfully our position on Venezuela is, it has always been, if you interfere with one, you interfere with all. Nothing about Dragon gas, say we say we're going to invade Venezuela for nothing. Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar didn't say that we invaded Venezuela. And for persons that maybe missed that, because we're going back in the past tonight, for persons that may have missed that conversation where Kamala said that she's not interested, and I said it on the last show, we are not interested and the government is not interested in Venezuela business. The only thing the government is interested in is the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Remember, this is what Kamala Persad-Bissessar said.
A lot of this fear-mongering, there have been no discussions with the U.S. or anyone else. However, I repeat, should Venezuela invade Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago will definitely step forward in defense of our cousins, our brothers and sisters. I will dare to do what I have to do to keep the people of Trinidad and Tobago safe, and that is my priority.
And unfortunately, during that, you had one junior minister that would have come out and said, you know, the thing about nuke and Venezuela and India and that narrative that Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, even myself, distance ourselves from. Kamala distanced herself from that. Same here. But Stuart Young seems to forget. So Stuart Young, let us remind you of the real issues. And for the people watching, I'm going to remind you now of the real issues. The real issue is not really dragging gas. The real issue that Kamala Prasad-Bissessar and the United National Congress have been fighting ever since 2020 is the fact that we are getting ourselves involved with Venezuela, a sanctioned country and sanctioned persons in Venezuela, a little bit too much. And Trinidad and Tobago need to remember who its allies are. That's all Kamala Prasad-Bissessar was saying back then, and it's the same conversation now. Kamala Prasad-Bissessar is the only leader in the Caribbean right now that is significantly recognizing the U.S. administration and simply agreeing with the U.S. troops here in the Caribbean seas to deal with, not deal with dragging gas, but to deal with guns and drugs and human trafficking. Let's not mix up the both of them. Because persons tend to mix up the both of them and say if Kamala is against drugs, then she must be against dragging gas because the people that run in dragging gas is the drug pushers in the Caribbean. That's persons' narratives, right? That's a narrative pushed by persons on social media, pushed by a set of young people who knows nothing about politics, apparently. All right? But let's go back in time and let's listen to the first time this matter was brought up. And this is via TTT News. So TTT News would have, well, I'm using TTT News clip right now, where the Prime Minister, Keith Christopher Rowley, would have called Kamala Prasad-Bissessar a traitor simply because sanctioned Delcy Rodriguez and the whole PDVSA team through Chavez and the rest of the people that Stuart Young did not know about came to Trinidad and Tobago, went into the diplomatic center and had a closed-door meeting with your Prime Minister at the time, Keith Christopher Rowley. Now, the thing is, Keith Rowley told Trinidad and Tobago, and also Stuart Young told Trinidad and Tobago, that the conversation was about COVID-19. Now, if it was about COVID-19, Kamala Prasad-Bissessar said, why is it you have people in charge of energy such as Chavez, that Stuart Young said they didn't know about. He didn't know who Chavez was. And then Delcy Rodriguez, he said he didn't know who Delcy Rodriguez was. And then suddenly a month later, she was appointed as VP and appointed as this and appointed as that. So they had a whole closed-door meeting with delegates they knew nothing about. Listen to this.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has hit back at the opposition leader, Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, for what he says is her attempt to have this country sanctioned for her own political gain. Dr. Rowley was responding to Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar, who earlier called on Dr. Rowley to come clean on his meeting with Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez 2 months ago. At a press conference held at the office of the opposition leader on Friday, Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar said she has in her possession documents sent by a concerned member of the public listing the names of persons who accompanied the Venezuelan vice president on her visit to Trinidad on March 27th. She claimed that energy officials were also part of the vice president's delegation who met with Prime Minister Rowley. The leader of the opposition said she has reason to believe the visit was not COVID-19 related and wants to know the nature of the meeting.
That flight, the passenger manifest also shows one Vincent Santana Migliacion, Vice President of PDVSA Gas. If this is true, I don't see what they came to talk about COVID. These are people out of the petroleum company of Venezuela, the president and the vice president.
Said the Prime Minister owes the citizens an explanation on what she described as a crucial matter.
It may be that it may deserve a police investigation, but I think it goes beyond just matters in our domestic purview. There are also serious matters with serious international implications.
But Dr. Rowley held a news conference in the Parliament chamber this afternoon and said the opposition leader was a traitor. Ian Wayson has the story.
And because a plane that brought the vice president here has an American sanction that we didn't know about, you are going to call for sanction on the people of Trinidad and Tobago? You are a traitor, lady.
The Prime Minister accused the opposition leader of seeking to have this country sanctioned for her own political aspirations and is desperate as the general elections are due later this year. He explained that many heads of state have visited this country before, but the government doesn't usually ask about flight information.
If it turns out that the aircraft that the Venezuelan delegation came on is an aircraft that was identified by the United States, that was unknown to us. Because we do not normally ask the presidential delegation what aircraft you're coming on, who owns the aircraft, and so on and so on.
He said the vice president of Venezuela was appointed by her government to head a COVID-19 task force, and no one from the Venezuelan delegation was introduced as an official of PDVSA. The Prime Minister reiterated the government's position on Venezuela is that of CARICOM's, in that the region recognizes the Maduro government.
And what the UNC is trying to do is to stir that pot, to upset the United States, hoping that they take deleterious action against Trinidad and Tobago. That, to me, is not just a fifth columnist. That is an underminer that is dangerous to everybody in Trinidad and Tobago.
Dr. Rowley is asking who the opposition leader is actually working for, as her actions cannot be for the good of the country, and describes her as a popular Hollywood character.
And it's gone beyond the diary of a mad, failed politician. Yeah.
The same mad, failed politician, Trinidad and Tobago, that defeated him at the 2025 polls. Well, he gave up. He gave up because it was Trump coming back. Listen, let's put context in here. What people need to go back to is that gas deal between Trinidad, the gas deal between Paria and Aruba. Because Paria sent gas to Aruba that somehow was ending up in Venezuela, that they suddenly probe and know nothing about and come out to tell us, clauses say this and clauses say that, and we can't sell gas to Venezuela. These are the same people that visited Venezuela over 19 times in talks of dragon gas. That's what you know of. These are the same people that allowed for 4 men to die in a pipeline, and they didn't try to save them at all. But nothing coming out of that. Nothing there. If you want to understand dragon gas and understand the government's position today on dragon gas, you need to go back in time. Don't listen to anybody that's going to come and tell you, this is what I want you to believe. Everything that I say in here, you could research for yourself, and I empower you to go on the internet, go on Google, and research it for yourself and see the timeline for yourself. Stuart Young today is telling you that the government lying, and the government telling you this, and they're misinforming you. Well, Stuart Young, provide the correct information for us. What is the misinformation? What's the misinformation, Stuart Young? What is the misinformation about dragon gas? Because all you have told the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries today, Dr. Rudal Munilal, is to go and read the clause. That's what you said. Go and read the clause. Enlighten us, Stuart Young. What was the NDA signed between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela that the United States said no to? Because that's what was going on. You went to Venezuela 19 times apparently, and you signed an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, to take oil from Venezuela or to buy oil from Venezuela, the dragon gas deal from Venezuela, the dragon field deal, and we, the country, would know nothing about it. That's a pattern by the PNM. That is the pattern. That, I am certain, is what Rubio said no to. Something in that clause, something with the NDA, some deal you was cooking up between Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago, you were cooking up, so therefore they said no to it. That whole deal was shut down. And Kamla Persad-Bissessar today, simply because it is a government that is 100% open and honest to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, the government comes back, Kamala comes back and says, dragon gas is on the table again. The United States is giving us the approval for the OFAC license. and then PNM suddenly telling you that is an about turn with the United National Congress and Kamala Persad-Bissessar and that she's somehow lying to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Stuart Young, help me find the lie. Where's the lie? Where's the misinformation? I want you to really tell us how this started, and I want to show the people of Trinidad and Tobago how this started. This all started by you, Stuart Young, bringing a sanctioned aircraft, a sanctioned vice president, or a sanctioned president for PDVSA, or whoever she is now. She's energy across there in Venezuela now. Right? You brought those sanctioned persons to Trinidad, and all Kamala Persad-Bissessar questioned was if you knew, and if you did know, why the hair? And then she questioned what was the context of the meeting, because you said it's COVID, you said it was about COVID-19, and then we suddenly started to wonder if our borders closed. What we doing having COVID conversations with the Venezuelan delegates for? Because they didn't donate anything to Trinidad and Tobago. It had nothing going on. We opened our borders for Venezuelans. In fact, it's still open. It was never closed. While it was closed to every other citizen, it was never closed to the Venezuelans. But I want to remind you, Trinidad and Tobago, that this is a government that didn't know. So while the Prime Minister back then, Keith Christopher Rowley, was saying one thing and talking about Kamala and elections coming up, and she's a traitor to Trinidad and Tobago. She's the only prime minister today or opposition leader back then that showed a real concern for people by taking salary cuts. Keith Christopher Rowley in Parliament say he don't want to entertain the conversation with salary cuts simply because he gave 50% of his salary to his constituents, what, on a one-off occasion? That's what he did. A one-off occasion, he gave 50% of his salary to. But I want to take you to Stuart Young, and I want you to pay attention to Stuart Young, because Stuart Young language changed. Stuart Young language changed. Back then, Stuart Young didn't know. He didn't know anything. He didn't know Delcy Rodriguez. He didn't know Chavez. They didn't know what type of aircraft come into Trinidad and Tobago. They didn't know who's the people they were meeting with. They didn't know the context of the conversation. They send the people, according to Stuart Young and according to former Prime Minister Rowley, they send the people in some back room in Diplomatic Center, some housing bay in Diplomatic Center, and they don't know who the people is. You remember Kamala Persad-Bissessar raising this just before elections? And she didn't even campaign on a Venezuelan elections. Kamala Persad-Bissessar campaigned on building a dome for Trinidad, which is what got her to lose the election. And then the banana conversation with black people. That's what made Kamala lose the election, not Delcy Rodriguez. But Delcy Rodriguez, as soon as Kamala Persad-Bissessar spoke about Delcy Rodriguez back then in 2020, that man, the Rottweiler, the dragon, the raging bull, stand up and he started to get on like what the former Prime Minister, Patrick Manning, deemed him to be, a raging bull. And if you oppose my good friend, that is what he becomes. And that is what this government, according to Patrick Manning, was not prepared for. And it is still what Trinidad and Tobago is not prepared for. But he put his very thoughts and ambition into Stuart Young, because Stuart Young come today talking about Keith Rowley and the former Prime Minister. But I want you to take in Stuart Young, because his tongue changed. Stuart Young was telling us that he didn't know. But now today, he knows. Take a listen.
There seems to be a continued proliferation of misinformation and misleading commentary taking place with respect to the visit of the Venezuelan Executive Vice President, Ms. Delcy Rodriguez, on the 27th of March of this year. As you've heard the Prime Minister, the Honourable Prime Minister, say, Trinidad and Tobago's position, as is CARICOM's position, is guided by the UN Charter. So at this stage, the UN Secretary General has advised from very early o'clock that the United Nations recognizes the Maduro government. We have no horse in the race. So in our continued recognition, in accordance with our obligations to the United Nations, a request was made in the first week of March by the Executive Vice President, Ms. Delcy Rodriguez, to come to Trinidad to speak to the Prime Minister. Ms. Rodriguez was appointed, I believe, on the 26th or 27th of February as the lead coordinator for the COVID response in Venezuela. Everything that happens in Venezuela has an effect on Trinidad and Tobago.
Pause there. Pause there for one quick second. So I want to make sure that you following what I following now, because this will tell you about today and it will give you more information about today and show you that the PNM is only in this for themselves and to safeguard themselves. So at the time, he just said there that Delcy Rodriguez was a COVID coordinator for Venezuela, leading to the fact that all of these people, all of these energy people come to talk to Trinidad and Tobago about COVID-19. I know how that's working out. When I get sick, I go in to call, who's these people, deal with dogs, right? Because, I go call a dog sitter. When I get sick, take me by a dog sitter. Don't take me to the hospital. Take me to a dog sitter. But listen to this man. Continue listening to him.
We're 7 miles off of the coast. Ms. Rodriguez came. There was no question or no asking of, well, what are you coming to discuss with us? The Prime Minister returned to Trinidad and Tobago on the 10th of March. I had a conversation with him thereafter. There was a plan for Ms. Rodriguez to come in, I believe, on the 16th of March. She then contacted me on that weekend to say she had developed a bit of a flu. In those circumstances, I asked Ms. Rodriguez to delay her trip to make sure that I protected Trinidad and Tobago and for us to ensure it was not anything related to the COVID virus.
Thank you so much, Stuart Young. We really felt protected back then during COVID-19. Thank you so much. So yeah, tell Delcy, hey, don't come to Trinidad if you have some illnesses. All right, come later on. But you left the citizens locked out of Trinidad. Oh, that is protecting us. Continue. He gets into the point though, right? He was drawing out the conversation to try and bore you, so therefore you're going to miss the most important thing that he said in this press conference back in 2020. Listen to it. Same narrative today, same Stuart Young today. Listen.
Authorization was given at the ministerial level. When I give authorization, I do not drill down into the type of plane, who owns the plane, nor do I ask to say who is the manifest, especially when it's a foreign government making the request. And I will give you other examples. The United States, who we continue to have an extremely good relationship with and who at National Security I work with on a weekly basis, made a request just a couple weeks ago for 2 military planes to land in Trinidad, to leave Trinidad, to come back to Trinidad. I just gave the approval because it is the United States government asking. I do not know.
Let me just go ahead and speed this up.
Who came on those flights?
But what the condition is that they couldn't disembark. They picked up personnel in Ghana, they picked up personnel in Trinidad, they left. I don't know what type of planes came in, who came in on the planes, etc. The same requests have been made by other governments who asked for repatriation of their citizens. The same request was made because they're running an energy sector that is the lifeblood of revenue for Trinidad and Tobago. So in working with the other upstream companies, the energy companies, as you all are aware, there was one weekend when 5 charter flights came in. I don't ask who is on the charter flight. Is it a Gulfstream? Is it a King Lear? What type of plane it is? Who owns the plane? But that information is provided. The public service processes that information. So the same thing applied. There have been many visits by the Venezuelan government over the past few years, way before even the sanctions came into place. At no time have I ever asked what plane it is, which plane you're coming in on.
So just to understand the minister there a little bit, because he now started to talk the real talk about the sanctions. So you know Venezuela had sanctions. But a plane coming into Trinidad carrying Venezuelan delegates, and you wouldn't dare to ask, what plane? You wouldn't dare to ask that. Venezuela sanctioned. Let me break it down for Trinidadians that need to understand this matter, right? Venezuela sanctioned. Venezuelan officials or delegates reached out to say they're coming to Trinidad and Tobago to meet with Prime Minister Rowley to talk COVID, according to them. All right? You know the sanction, but you wouldn't ask them what type of plane and who coming. And you're telling me that you're listening to this opposition today, the PNM. You're listening to the same people that lied to you, blatantly lied to you during 2020 for COVID-19. Let's continue, because we get into the meat now.
This whole conversation, Trinidad and Tobago, began with certain voices, Trinidadian voices, first of all starting and focusing on the sale of fuel by Paria on its route to Aruba. That is how this conversation began. So those who were not in the know started a conversation. Did Trinidad and Tobago, through Paria, sell fuel to Aruba that ended up somewhere else? We have investigated this. And I'm happy to say that the contract was a very clear contract with that sale of fuel to Aruba, which has happened in the past, because Paria supplies fuel throughout the region, including to Aruba. There is an important condition and clause that was in that contract, and that condition and clause by Paria in the sale of fuel to Aruba, or for transmission to Aruba, had an important clause that said that that fuel is not for any sanctioned country. It is not for Iran, it is not for South Korea, it's not for Venezuela. So that is how Paria protected Trinidad and Tobago.
That's interesting, Trinidad and Tobago. That's interesting, simply because there was a headline, all right? I want to get the headline for you and read the headline verbatim, actually. But there was a headline that was released by Express newspaper, and the headline read, let me get it. Get the headline, because the headline from the United States read that U.S. probe Paria, U.S. probe Paria, and that was based off
in the sale of fuel. They're told that it is for...
Sorry about that. It was based off fuel leaving Paria, going to Aruba, but ending up in Venezuela. And the U.S. warned countries from doing business with PDVSA. And that's just all before Delcy Rodriguez come to Trinidad. All of that before. You seen it? You seen the ties to the corruption? All before. That is what the probe was. Kamla Persad-Bissessar would have raised the concern, and remember the talk with Fuelgate, raised the concern and asked the question, what is going on? Is it true that fuel ended up going bound, destined for Venezuela, noting from Paria it's supposed to go to Aruba? And that question was asked. But let's continue.
Aruba, there was the insertion of a clause, a specific contractual condition that the fuel is not for a sanctioned country. So that debunks this whole conversation that Paria or the government of Trinidad and Tobago negotiated or entered into any sale of fuel.
Let me read the article again because I think Stuart Young going mad. Right? This is the probe. Get there. U.S. probes Trinidad and Tobago fuel shipment linked to Venezuela. All right, Stuarty? This is what Stuart Young is talking about. And in the article, Trinidad and Tobago, if I were to read the first line for you, the U.S. said, quote, any nation that assists Venezuela in avoiding embargoes will face sweeping sanctions imposed by the United States. The warning comes from the U.S. government after it became aware of reports that a shipment of Paria Fuel Trading Company fuel that left Trinidad and Tobago shores for Aruba may have eventually been sent to Venezuela in defiance of U.S. sanctions against that country. Not only that, in this report, it would have also listed out things like the companies linked to the sanctions and the persons linked to the sanctions, such as PDVSA. PDVSA is linked directly in that report. If you were to scroll down right there, under there, PDVSA is linked in that report, Trinidad and Tobago. The same aircraft, the same PDVSA aircraft that magically arrived in Trinidad and them didn't know. That is what Stuart Young telling us. Not only that, Delcy Rodriguez's name was listed in a report as being sanctioned by the United States of America for narco-terrorism. She was a narco-terrorist, a drug pusher, because she was appointed by the drug pusher Nicolas Maduro. And her name was linked there. But in fact, I have the picture. Get here. It's a little blurry, but you could go online and find it for yourself. But the names are listed here. Delcy Rodriguez's name is listed there. Chavez's name is listed there as well. Look, Mr. Chavez's name on top. Persons that are sanctioned by the United States entered into Trinidad and Tobago. And Stuart Young didn't know at all. But he met with them. But he said he only met with 2 delegates. He met with 2 delegates and the rest went into some room and they didn't know what the conversation was about because it was about COVID apparently. Let's take a listen.
By certain people in Trinidad. Up to today in the newspapers, one of them suggesting that, well, I don't know if this happened, but if this happened and there was a sale of a fuel in this manner, this is what it means. The answer is it did not happen. A very careful contract for a normal sale of fuel took place with a condition: it is not to be provided to any sanctioned country. That is the first point. And as soon as that whole tower started to crumble, that whole conversation coming from certain quarters in Trinidad, in a manner meant to create disinformation, in a manner meant to try and put us under scrutiny by our very close ally, the United States. The next thing we had is an appearance of certain manifests to do with the plane. As I've stated very clearly, as the Minister of National Security, with a request made, I authorized the Executive Vice President of Venezuela to come for a meeting with the Honorable Prime Minister. Up to Friday, when I heard the leader of the opposition, I did not know what type of plane they came on, who it is, etc. I've also heard it suggested that it is not true that we did not know who this delegation was. Exactly how it unfolded, people of Trinidad and Tobago, is at that stage there was COVID, so we were very cautious. The persons who could come into the room to meet with the Prime Minister was limited. We only met 2 people, the we being the Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister Moses, and myself. That was the extent of the Trinidadian delegation. The extent of the Venezuelan delegation that we met with was the Executive Vice President, Ms. Rodriguez, and a Mr. Chavez. Mr. Chavez was not introduced to us as any vice president or president of PDVSA. In fact, at the time, we've subsequently found out he was on a commission for the restructuring of PDVSA. That meeting took place on the 27th of March. It is only on the 28th of April, a month and a day later, the same Mr. Chavez was made the president of PDVSA. So once again, you have people trying to mislead the population.
Just imagine that. I want to appoint somebody to work for me and take them to President's house or Prime Minister's house. Who want to go? And then you're going to become the host of the show. Because that is how deals are made, that is how things are done apparently. You don't know who the person is, but the next month they are made president. Imagine that. How you well went up the ladder quick, boy. You become president quick. And nobody knows. And I think I said that this happened before. Let me correct it. This happened right after the visit. Right? So the fuel went to Aruba or ended up somewhere in Venezuela. And that happened just after the visit. All right? Following that story there, Trinidad and Tobago, Guardian Media, according to the article, would have reached out to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, God rest his soul, Franklin Can, the Prime Minister, Key Christopher Rowley, and also the Minister of National Security, Stuart Young. Get the thing? They had some questions for all of them, for the whole, that was the COVID Avengers team, right? They had a question for them. The question was, number 1, has Trinidad and Tobago facilitated a shipment of fuel to Aruba? Question number 2, was the discussion during the visit with Venezuelan Vice President now, Delcy Rodriguez, last month? Was the head of PDVSA there at the meeting? Is this country facilitating fuel shipments to Venezuela? And all of these questions, Trinidad and Tobago, was seen by Stuart Young, but it wasn't answered at all. Guardian Media also sent the following questions to Prime Minister Keith Christopher Rowley. Is there something that was arranged during the Delcy Rodriguez visit with you last month? They also asked, was the PDVSA President Juan Santana also at the meeting? Is Trinidad and Tobago facilitating shipment of fuel to Venezuela? And the article reads as follows. He also did not respond to those questions, and calls to his mobile phone went unanswered. And you have the Oilfield Workers Trade Union also not responding to any questions either. And then following that, the U.S. ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago said Keith Rowley's continued recognition of Maduro's regime was deeply concerning to the United States. All of that right there in that article. The headline of the article again, Trinidad and Tobago, is the United States probes Trinidad and Tobago fuel shipment linked to Venezuela. And that is how PDVSA, not PDVSA, but that is how Dragon Gas all came about, because that is what they wanted, right? They want the underlying deals to say that the government making all kind of money, so therefore they could probably take it for themselves. It is alleged. But that is where it all came from. So before you come out and you talk about Kamala having a change in heart and she changing her tone and all kind of nonsense, you don't understand where it come from. The PNM was doing underlying business with Venezuela. Still yet to be proven. Still yet to be proven. But that is what the people of Trinidad and Tobago should be questioning. What was the NDA signed by PNM and Venezuela? Why the Secretary of State said no to your OFAC license? Why it was revoked? Tell me now. Tell the nation that. That is the real questions that need to be answered. Not the fact that Kamala Persad-Bissessar getting the license. You should be happy that Kamala Persad-Bissessar getting the license for Dragon Gas, because it is a good deal. And yes, Kamala Persad-Bissessar did say that she's not pursuing Dragon Gas. Pursuing means I am not going to make it a priority. The priority by the people's government, the Kamala Persad-Bissessar-led administration, has always been and is about people and putting people first. And yeah, you're going to tell me about CPEP and URP and reforestation and all of that. But the fact is, those things were corrupted to the high heavens. You could have smell it. Just as what the late Patrick Manning would have told us, UDCOT stinks to the high heavens. And it's the same thing with CPEP and URP. And it's inevitable. We need to deal with those things if we want to move forward in Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, persons are going to be on the breadline at times, but that's not going to be so forever. It will not be so forever. And it's not that I am condoning firing persons. I am not condoning firing persons. But what I'm against is the corruption. And Kamala Persad-Bissessar said it. She said, I love people, but I'm against corruption. She don't like ghosts. Should I play that? So people could understand? Where is it? Where's the director? Play that? Let me get that, because I think people really need to hear it. Right? And we have everything here, you know. We have everything here. This is what Kamala Persad-Bissessar said. Let me remind you.
I think it was yesterday. I love people, but I don't like ghosts. And therefore we have to weed out the corrupt ones. We have to weed out the ghosts. You'd have seen the URP chairman gave an interview, carried in one of the papers today, where he outlined how, what, when, where. So we cannot continue this. But what is even more important, our intelligence coming from the TTPS and the other protective services is not just about the corruption in the ghost gangs, is the infiltration by criminal elements.
Most important, Trinidad and Tobago. This is what she's referring to. URP manager Khan reveals massive corruption in URP. Listen, this whole fiasco, Trinidad and Tobago, people up over it over nothing. People worried about it over nothing. If it is we get Dragon Gas, tell yourself you're lucky, because Trinidad barely have reserves left. They shut down Petrotrin. Kamala Persad-Bissessar said she wants to reopen Petrotrin. Right, look at all that going on in the country, man, and we still didn't finish, you know. We still didn't finish, because I would have to play for you that one of the reasons why Kamala Persad-Bissessar found the visit of Delcy Rodriguez very much concerning is because Keith Rowley said our border is closed and he can't be making all these exceptions for all sorts of persons, and that he have to put the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who here in the country first, and he have a duty to safeguard us from COVID. That's what Rowley said. And then Stuart Young saying something different with PDVSA team coming in Trinidad. Y'all remember COVID? You remember this?
Much as we'd like to, there are some other people who are close by. My understanding is that the people in Suriname, it is whether they are trying to arrange their transport. The Minister of National Security have given them the assurance that once they could get themselves here, they can come in. The ones from Barbados are now home in the country, going through the local quarantine. And of course, I have no doubt that there will be lots and lots of requests to the Minister of National Security for persons to come in. We just want to understand, much as we like to have everybody come home, there is a virus to be kept out and there are protocols to be followed. I want that to be very clear. We are not going to compromise the people of Trinidad and Tobago to please any interests other than the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Individual interests are individual interests, but the national interest is paramount.
I'm so glad that man is now a prime minister. Boy, woo good. Hey, what's that? That was 10 years of suffering. No, I'm so serious because you saw the appeal court saying something different, guys. The appeal court overruled his whole judgment about not bringing people back in Trinidad and Tobago and called it blatantly unconstitutional. It was an unconstitutional act to have certain persons have this requirement and other persons have this requirement, and then Delcy Rodriguez have a different requirement and you didn't even know the aircraft. Imagine we locked down and you don't know why aircraft landing in your own country, but you're telling me our border is secured. Our border is secured. And we should be safeguarded, and you trying to safeguard the people of Trinidad and Tobago, but you didn't know what aircraft landing in Trinidad, right? And then the imbecile Stuarty, still imbecile today, member of parliament he's the member of parliament for the right constituency, St. Anne's, had something mad to say today. Listen to him.
It allowed dragon gas to be sold to Trinidad and Tobago, and they would not do it for in kind. So you would then recall back and forth, I was going up to Washington, then obtained an amendment to that OFAC license for Dragon. Later on in October of 2023 that said you can pay in fiat currency, which is basically recognized currency, whether it be in EU dollars or whether it be in United States dollars. It allowed us to be able to pay for the gas. And then it was in December that we finally managed to negotiate the 30-year license. Look at the language very carefully from Secretary Rubio's office that talks about what they are prepared to look at. That's the first point. The second is you now have to go through applying to OFAC and waiting on the terms of the license from OFAC. And it is only then you will know what is the landscape and playing field that you can now go to Venezuela and attempt to negotiate. But as I just said, you have to go to Venezuela and negotiate with Venezuela, the owners of the gas. It is absolutely no secret the position and the stance of this government, and in particular from the voice of the Prime Minister towards our closest neighbor and the government of Venezuela. And if Munilal doesn't know it, the Vice President of Venezuela is also the Minister of Energy in Venezuela now, and the person in charge of these resources, and her name is Delcy Rodriguez. And it is the same Munilal.
Don't lie. You remember the name? I saw that her dropping out him out. I saw that her dropping out him out. Because for years he tried to shy away from that name Delcy Rodriguez. He was never saying the name Delcy Rodriguez because that was bringing up too much controversy. Too much. He was afraid of it. But now you could say the name, you could smile and say the name, you could talk about UNC going to Venezuela as this big thing. Yeah, UNC going Venezuela, they can't go across there, blah, blah, blah. Diplomatic treaties or diplomatic relations broken because Kamala said this and Kamala said that and Kamala said the other, and the UNC government this, that, and the other. And now they need it. PNM was the best for the country. Yeah. Yeah, man. The best for the country. PNM was the right choice. So all your bitches could die in hell.
Of students writing SCA in March 2026. Our Tuesday and Thursday class is filled, but we have heard your calls. Starting this October on Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., we have a new class geared for success. We cover all three subjects: mathematics, English language arts, and creative writing. We have perfected the art of pushing students to success. So if you want to get your child into one of these limited spaces, send us a WhatsApp message now at 370-9426 and book your spot before all are gone and give your child the best chance at success.
Welcome to SNS Facade Group of Companies, a dynamic community-driven group serving multiple industries with excellence and integrity. At SNS Facade Supermarket, we're committed to community, providing vessel export delivery, custom food services, local delivery, wholesale solutions, fresh produce, in-house bakery, and premium meats. Discover relaxation reimagined at Sunset Beach Resort, with beachfront stays and dining that blends local flavor with ocean views, perfect for families and couples. At Cuts and Curve Fitness Center, where health meets lifestyle, with personal training, meal plans, a full gym, and on-site cafe. The SNS Facade Group of Companies, building value, trust, and community across everything we do.
Parents of students writing SCA in March 2026. Our Tuesday and Thursday class is filled, but we have heard your calls. Starting this October on Saturdays from 9...
Doubles and coffee. Well, all here, like my father, who does still watch Young and Restless and thing after 40 years and the story ain't go nowhere. All they don't have to watch Young and Restless again. All they could just watch Balize House. And Balize House is just total chaos. Penny, while she's storming and trying to follow Kamala and peeking in at the UN and going all around like a vagrant looking to see who she could meet with, who they could get she in a room with. While she outside there, she ain't getting chance to lead nothing called the PNM. It have two former prime minister who say, one say he retired, but he talking more on all kind of issues, looking for relevance and going to visit children to tell them read and things. When he was prime minister, he didn't care if children read, if they pass exam, if they get gate. He wanted to wean all of them off of the resources of the taxpayer and the government money to put it where he and the ministers could recuse themselves. The next one, Stuart Young, a selected, undemocratic, oppressive, tyrannical clown. He talking now. Penny don't know which one to talk, who is the leader, who want to lead the PNM. But let me deal with Smallpin, because I'm trying to figure out all morning if Stuart Smallpin Young is daft, if Stuart Smallpin Young is dotish, if Stuart Smallpin Young is dumb, if Stuart Smallpin Young is dishonest, or if it's all of the above. The Honorable Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar was invited to Washington after making a speech in the UN, after showing strength and character, taking Trinidad and Tobago's foreign policy direct to the doorstep of our #1 trading partner, letting the USA know that our future is intrinsically linked to them. Our trading partner, our energy future, our university future, our sporting future, our tourism future, our investment future. Kamla Persad-Bissessar made a direct change from the PNM that was moving towards Venezuela, Russia, Iran, and China. Kamla Persad-Bissessar said the USA must be our partners for security, for safety, to protect the 7 miles of the Gulf of Paria. Her statements have been strong, and the PNM has criticized her foreign policy at every juncture with Amory Brown after he take off he little kind of dress he had on with his shoulder exposed and so on. Every moment criticizing Kamla Persad-Bissessar and Sean Sobers for our foreign policy that puts our students, our coaches, our athletes, our recreational spaces, our goods, our food, our everything in the safe hands of who we trade with historically. So the USA is our #1 trading partner. Our energy, our safety, our security, our food security, everything. So that's Kamla Persad-Bissessar's policy. Because of that strong policy, she was invited and had to jump on a train to go to Washington to meet with the Secretary of State of the United States. And coming out of that, many discussions of which we don't have all the details, the statement from the Secretary of State office is that they will find a way for energy security based on the US and Trinidad and Tobago's joint policy and belief in safety, security, and the security of the Caribbean, and anti-dictatorship, anti-narco-terrorist, anti-money laundering, anti-Maduro policy where Venezuelan people have run away from in the millions, 8 million people. That is Kamla Persad-Bissessar's policy. The PNM's policy was to love Maduro. Never mind he's a narco-terrorist. Never mind he's a dictator. Never mind he thief election. Never mind he's a money launderer. Never mind he allowing drugs to pass. Never mind any of that. The PNM policy was to go and conga line with Maduro, for Stuart Smallpin Young to go back and forth 12 times in 1 year to go and meet surreptitiously with Delcy Rodriguez, PDVSA officials, and Maduro. Rowley to dance like a clown with Maduro. That is the PNM policy. Kamla Persad-Bissessar is the stark oblique opposite, and therefore the USA has said, listen, there's a possibility, since both of us are on the same page, that Maduro regime must not benefit significantly from any business transaction because he stole election, because he's illegitimate, because he's a narco-terrorist, because he's indicted, because there's a $50 million US bounty on his head. And in the courts of the United States, evidence of the grand jury has said that he's a narco-terrorist, but he must not benefit. Stuart Young come out and say, oh, the UNC backtrack and they flip-flop on the dragon gas. Is it that you're daft, Stuart Smallpin Young? Is it that you're dumb? Is it that you're dotish, Smallpin? Or is it that you're just dishonest, or all of the above? When is the UNC against any gas? The UNC is not against gas. We need gas. We need lots of gas because you and the PNM for 9.5 years did nothing, put all our energy eggs in one basket with Maduro and Delcy, broke every rule, tried to scull, tried to break sanctions, Paria and Newman George with Aldan and ships coming in April 2020, 1.2 million barrels of fuel that end up in Palo Alito, Venezuela. You feel the USA don't know that? You feel they don't know what your policy was, Stuart Smallpin Young and the PNM? That was your policy, to put all our eggs in one basket. Dragon, secret NDA deals. So much so that the country of Trinidad and Tobago, we don't even know yet. We're waiting for Dr. Monilal in the budget to tell us how much millions of US we have paid Maduro already for nothing. That you signed away small pin. So you were giving Maduro significant benefit. US dollars is significant benefit. Money in his pocket is significant benefit. Kamala Prasad says, and we will get the details. I don't know the details of how it will work, why it will work, if it will work. But we await the details. But the key significant point is that Maduro must not benefit. The PNM was Maduro must benefit. Maduro is the boss. Maduro, I see a woman who's an insurance agent, a supposedly intelligent woman balling. But how you could get it? If you deal with the gas, if you want the cross-border gas, you have to deal with Maduro. No, there are many other options. And you don't deal just because someone has assets. So if a gangster have cocaine money, you must deal with them and go and make deal and get them work and do all kind of thing because them is gangster and they have money. No. You have to stand for something. And Kamala Prasad and the UNC stand for democracy, freedom, people, patriotism, return of Venezuelan migrants to Venezuela, the country that they love. We uphold the law, democracy, election results, free transfer of power. That's what we stand for, not PNM. Maduro could do what he want. People could run. He could lock up who he want. He could break every law. There could be nepotism, recusals, control of the Supreme Court, taking over the National Assembly in Venezuela. Rowley and Smallpen didn't care. They didn't want to investigate and negotiate with upstream. The UNC is not putting all the eggs in one basket. Dragon gas, cross-border gas is good gas. Maduro is not a good regime. Maduro is not a legitimate regime. Maduro is a narco-terrorist. The Kamala Prasad stands against drug cartels. Maduro is in a court in the USA, has been indicted for running and allowing cartels and drugs to move forward. And Kamala Prasad wants to keep our people safe. She has said that the Caribbean is now a zone of war. When you check it, and those other leaders, Mia Motley, with all due respect, stay calm, please. You don't suffer like Trinidad and Tobago. We had 622 murders in 1 year. I think the highest murder rate you had in the last 5 years is 50, Mia Motley. So your blood of your Barbadians is not spilling like the blood of our people, our young people. So you may not understand because you're not swimming in our blood. So I'm St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Dancer Boy. You, who's Rowley's best friend, your top murder rate is 45. 45. We at 622. I mean, it's going down now under Kamala Prasad, and the United National Congress, but it's still not good. We have been awash with blood for 10 years, increasing murder rates under Stuart, the same Stuart Smallpen Young, 519, 539. Then replaced with Fitzgerald, a Talbot, narcolepsy, sleepy, sativa, wooden ladder, ride a horse with an 8-year-old boy in his lap, Hines, and it went up to 604, 622. Antigua, your murder rate is probably 30 for the year. If we get that, we might celebrate and have 2 carnivals. Our children are dying all over. We are a zone of war because of the drug cartels, because of the guns that come in with the drugs, because of the transshipment point. So we have to fight for our people. And to all of y'all who feel that that is not something that we should fight for, then all you don't understand. Because you're not empathetic. You don't feel the pain of the mothers and the grandmothers and the aunties who have to bury their young men, who see their brains and their blood spilling out on the hot asphalt. We don't take that so. Kamala Prasad is a mother. Every murder, every bit of blood spilled, every child, every woman that is there that bothers her, stops her from sleeping. She will do anything and everything to keep Trinidad and Tobago safe. So Stuart Smallpen Young, UNC didn't change any position on Dragon. UNC always love gas. Gas is the lifeblood. Kamala Prasad says energy policy is across the board. She bring Exxon. negotiating, sending Monilal to negotiate with Suriname, with Grenada.
And I agree. And that was Senator Anil Roberts. The whole clip is there on Facebook, guys. I wanted to play as much as possible before I run out of time. And it's true. Position is not changed. It is the same on gas. ExxonMobil is back after how many years? But again, PNM could take credit for that. There are some things I want PNM to take credit for. I want PNM to take credit, and Stuart Young, you in particular, should take credit for the 4 that died at Paria. You should take credit for bringing a sanctioned aircraft into Trinidad and Tobago, almost getting Trinidad and Tobago sanctioned with all the madness that happened between Venezuela, Aruba, and Paria. That's what you should take credit for. You should take credit for locking thousands of people out of Trinidad, so much so that the appeal court today says something differently, says that you guys operated unconstitutionally. Take credit for that. Take credit for the debt that Trinidad and Tobago is in. That's what you should take credit for. The $1 billion deficit that your finance minister want to talk about in that very same press conference today, take credit for that, because that was PNM. And I'm starting to like Imbert a little bit, you know. I'm starting to like Imbert a little bit. Because Imbert actually come out to say that it's because of them. You should go listen to that press conference. It's because of them. And Imbert said the truth. The problem with Ole and the PNM is that Ole don't listen. We don't listen. And that is the PNM downfall. And still today, that is a very downfall of the PNM. But there is something that Anil Roberts said, and it's for Mia Motley. Mia Motley, we are no beef, you know. But stay in your goddamn lane, Mia. You talk about Barbados. You worry about Barbados and worry about how expensive it is to live in Barbados. Worry about that. Trinidad and Tobago has a very unique issue with Venezuela. And it is guns, drugs, crime, prostitution, all of that, human trafficking. And you know what? I want to play this clip because I was the one that said it. First one I think that said it to Barbados. Right now, Trinidad and Tobago, Mia Motley called for the UN to stop treating small islands like children is 100% ill-founded. 100%. Simply because while Mia Motley is calling on the UN to stop treating Caribbean nations like children, she is the same one, run this picture, she is the same one that is against the actions by the United States in the Caribbean Sea. She and the bosshead Prime Minister crossing St. Vincent and the Grenadines. They are against the actions of the United States, but asking to be on the Security Council to push what type of agenda, Mia? To always push the road of peace. That's it. Because we hear your story, we hear your side on the quote-unquote genocide taking place in Palestine. We hear it, and you want peace. We recognize the two-nation state, the two-nation states, and all of that. But if your agenda for the United Nations on the Security Council is just to recognize peace in the zone, in the Caribbean zone, I could speak to that. Maybe Barbados is not as close to Venezuela as Trinidad and Tobago is, that so much so drugs, guns, ammunitions roll into this country, and all of the illicit activities that go on through Trinidad and Venezuela hamper with us here in this country and our citizenry. And so much so, it is a known fact that Trinidad and Tobago has become, in the recent times and recent years, a hub for drug shipping, and it's a transshipment right here in Trinidad and Tobago that our Prime Minister wants to deal with. CARICOM stated in 2019, Mia Motley, that Trinidad and Tobago have a serious problem, a very serious drug problem, human trafficking problem. The US noted the same in a 2023 report or so. And it is Kamala Persad-Bissessar that seek to address that, not Key Christopher Rowley. Go to pictures. Anyway, so that's that Trinidad and Tobago. That full clip is on YouTube and is on Facebook for your viewing. But nothing we say, nothing I said was a lie. Interesting, right? Very interesting. But anyway, the people in this country, unfortunately, will continue to listen to PNM. There are those in this country that are just so dumb, so stupid, so far from the truth, and so misguided that the only thing that makes sense for them is whatever bullshit comes out of the mouth of Stuart Young, the man that lied to your face during COVID, but then coming to tell us today that he liars now is UNC, when the narrative from the UNC has been the same. Has been the same. Nothing changed. Nothing changed at what Kamla Persad-Bissessar was saying. The moment Maduro decides to jump out himself and invade Guyana or annex some parts of Guyana or take back land, is the moment Kamla Persad-Bissessar said, we have no problem with U.S. troops landing here. The same bogus document that your prime minister signed but suddenly didn't sign that type of agreement. He didn't sign that type of agreement. He didn't say U.S. could put troops in Trinidad. He said, we just signed a bilateral agreement which will allow for our military to work with their military. But the blasted headline on the paper was U.S. can put troops in Trinidad. The PNM. Pressure, nigger, more. That's what PNM stands for. Because I feeling pressured as a black person in Trinidad right now. And that is one of the reasons why PNM was voted out. That's one of the reasons why PNM was voted out. Because they continue to pressure the people of Trinidad and Tobago into believing that they are the ones that cared for us when so much of us was suffering under PNM. So much. You close down gate. Well, they ain't close down gate. You cut gate. You get gate funding. Children, all they had to figure it out for themselves. Figure out how all they go into university. But your child, USA, she going to university outside of Trinidad and Tobago. That's where she went. When he shut down borders, nobody in the country at all. Nobody in, nobody out. COVID-19. Christmas come. Your family fly in. People forget that. Rowley whole family was here. Even the son that you disown was here with you in Trinidad. You disown the man and you show up again for COVID. He was here in Trinidad while everybody else was locked out. Which is why, again, the appeal court would have ruled differently and said you're unconstitutional. When you call a state of emergency, you say, oh, movement. You're trying to limit movement. And it is the Privy Council that ruled against you and say, your government can't curtail rights during the SOE. You still have your freedom of movement because they deem it a public health emergency. Just as what they deem crime. Public health emergency. Tonight, the public health emergency is that in Balize House. Is that comes from the opposition. Is that comes from Penelope Beckles. The leader that now wants to be in everything but nowhere at the same time. Look at here. Try not to laugh. God bless you, Penelope Beckles. And God bless the United States of America. Hey, God bless you all. I don't know what to say about the PNM anymore. I don't know what to say. Penny really went to the US for the United Nations. She said she went to the church. Bear in mind, the church on this side. That's where the church is at, the church on this side. But Penny ended up across here. I hear she went to meet with this Rubio fella who does do the, who involved in thieving Trinidadians' money. You know that young fella? I hear she went and meets with him. But I actually watched a post today, Trinidad. And the post say Penny, you can just follow Kamala on Facebook. You know how to watch her every move. And I saw another one with Penny behind the flag peeping. Hey, God bless them, boy. God bless them. All they need help. The whole of PNM need help. But anyway, Trinidad and Tobago, the dragon gas deal is back on, and we wait to see what happens from the good Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar. She should be back in the country today. I think she would have flown back in today, or maybe she's on a flight back to Trinidad and Tobago. Hopefully by tomorrow, we'll have a press conference with all the good things that came out of her visit to the United States for both the United Nations and then the invite to Washington, D.C. So we wait to see what the Prime Minister has to say and what she is coming back with. Already we know the UAE and the Couva Multi-Trading, or the Couva Children's Hospital, we know there are some good things coming there. The China $94 million loan, and I think it was a $1.4 billion or $1 billion investment by China as well. There's a lot that will impact on the show on Saturday's the next show? Damn, on Saturday. All right? So, Trinidad and Tobago, thank you so much for joining tonight. I hope to see you back here on Saturday, and we'll go over some more on Saturday. I hope you learned something. I hope that everyone learned something from this show. I definitely learned something. What I learned is what I already know. The PNM cannot be trusted. It cannot be trusted at all. All right? Thank you again for joining tonight, Trinidad and Tobago. See you on Saturday at 8 p.m. Weekend Review with David K. Welch. Have a good night.